Hey everybody, how's it going? Max with BuzzTox here. Now, I've been gone for a while. It's very good to be back. To be honest, I'm not expecting many of you or many people to show up since Westworld is like 2 weeks out. I've been gone for about a week, and I apologize I haven't been uploading. I just think it was time for me to just take a breather. I wanted to take a week and relax. And now we're going to do this live stream, which is going to be the last Westworld live stream. We're going to wrap it up. I might do a couple more videos for Westworld. And then for you Game of Thrones fans, I need to start easing back into Game of Thrones. So what I'm going to do personally is I'm going to start watching season 1 again. And I'm going to be watching through Game of Thrones because I need to get myself back into the Game of Thrones mode. It's really hard for me to just jump back in and start making videos. I need to like familiarize myself with the world, which is kind of weird. But I need to get into it. I need to be passionate about it. So that's why I want to start watching season 1 again, really get into it, and then I'll start putting out those Game of Thrones videos. And I think while I'm doing that, I think I might, if you look at my channel, I put 4 episodes of Game of Thrones season 1. I did a review, and I look back on the nuggets of information that we can gather for the next season. So I think I might continue to do that. But they'll be like 5 to 10 minutes. I'll quickly recap and talk about the important points. Just a really quick way that you can get a thorough understanding of every single episode of Game of Thrones. And it really refamiliarizes me with Game of Thrones, so I can work on my predictions, so I can work on season 8 videos. And then there's a spinoff coming, so I want to talk about that. But I need to get familiar with the world again. And this is the close to Westworld. This live stream, I want to do a final discussion, really wrapping up how we felt about the season, what to expect for season 3. I looked deeper into some of the things like the pearls and fidelity. My opinions remained pretty much the same on the finale. It wasn't my favorite, but the show as a whole was very strong. And I got to say, episode 1 all the way through episode 9, I thought was very strong. Even though certain episodes like episode 9, episode 8, etc., I feel like they didn't push the plot forward the way that they should have. I know that episode 9 focused a lot on William, and I feel like that episode 9, it would have set up a great season finale, but it didn't. And I got to say, I feel like the information that they dropped about William in season 9 and the information that we got about Akecheta had a whole episode dedicated to him. So that makes me think that even though it seems like William was painted as just a villain, and even though it seems like Akecheta was just beamed off to like this secret society in the middle of nowhere, I think these characters are going to be coming back in the way in which they've been presented. It's hard for me to believe that they're going to do a whole episode dedicated to Akecheta and immediately retire his character a season or a couple episodes after. I understand that Dolores said, I'm going to beam them somewhere where no one else can find them. But at the same time, we know that hosts remember everything. And if anybody remembers those coordinates, it's Dolores. And I think not in next season, but in a couple seasons, maybe season 4, season 5, we'll get a look at that secret society, this alternate universe. And I think it'll be really cool to see, because we'll see what happens to this host-based society and what did they achieve without human interference. What does their society look like? What does their what is their culture like? What are all these things? I'd be really interested to see a city and a society that is based on the hosts. It's based on their culture. It's based on their intelligence. And I think it would be really cool if it was something that we never really have seen before. It's not a city. It's not a typical suburb. It's something very unique to the hosts because they're programmed to be the most efficient and they're supposed to be better than humans. So I think we should see a society that reflects that. Excuse me. But I had to get a coffee, guys, keep my energy up. So I'm going to be sipping on that for this this whole video. So please get used to it. And for everyone in the chat, Jay Patel, what's going on, buddy? The programmer of video games, what's going on? I pretty much expect you in every single one, and I really appreciate your support. Thank you for coming, the programmer of video games. Donald Parrish, what's going on? Good to see you guys. So to be honest, I have a few bullet points I want to talk about. If you guys have no questions, then this is going to be a relatively short live stream. But it's so hard to just spout things on your own and just talk and talk and talk. But in the meantime, I'm going to talk about the season finale and a couple of points that are going to carry over to season 3. And the first thing I really wanted to talk about was the pearls. And I think I'm going to make a video talking about this specifically based on what I've been looking at. And the real question is, Dolores escapes with 5 pearls. So the question is, who are in these pearls? And I really looked back at the season, and I think we can get a couple of really good educated guesses on who it is and who it definitely is not. And we know that the producers of the show, they said that there's going to be a couple surprises in there. And I think they're right. I think there's going to be some hosts in there that we're not necessarily going to expect, and maybe some hosts that we've seen as secondary characters and not necessarily primary characters. So when you're looking at the pearls, I think there's a couple of things to look at. And the key question to ask is, how did Dolores get access to these 5 pearls? What did she do to get access to these pearls? And I think there's a lot of different places where she could have gathered these pearls. And first thing I want to draw a connection to is all these pearls are black. They're not red. So there's absolutely no human-based printed code human. Sorry, I need to figure out a more efficient way to say that, but they're all regular hosts. So I think she got a lot of these pearls when she was Charlotte. And that means the timeline that's the present timeline. When Bernard wakes up on the beach, he goes to the mesa. He sees Charlotte, who is actually Dolores, and she then takes Bernard to Ford's laboratory. And then they go back to the forge and they visit that area. So I think there's a lot of things that she had access to. First of all, when Dolores became Charlotte, she had access to the mesa. She was in the mesa. She had access to every dead host that was in the mesa and has died in the mesa. Another important thing is that all of the hosts that drowned in the giant lake that we see, we learned that 1/3 of them are virgin, which means there's none of them. There's nothing in them. And there's 2/3 that were drowned that actually have a character in there. They're actually data. And we see later in the show that they actually took all these people out of the water and they put them back in the facility. We know that Dolores or Charlotte had access to every single one of those hosts. And then Ford's laboratory. We see her take Bernard to Ford's underground facility. And this is where she finds out that Bernard is a host, or pretends to find out that Bernard is a host. This is another location where Charlotte or Dolores could have discovered more pearls to take with her. And then that all encapsulates in the end when she makes it to the forge and she shoots Bernard. And the reason why she shoots Bernard is because Bernard, as a host, can't leave to the real world. So she kills him and she takes his control module. So that is the one person that we pretty much have a guarantee that she has. One of those pearls is Bernard, and we see him reprinted in the present timeline outside of Westworld. Now, a couple other people that I think are possibilities is, I think Abernathy is a strong possibility. And I know that his code was altered. It has errors in it, but it was a key that was used to unlock the forge. And I don't think Dolores is just going to throw away her dad's marble. So I think she held on to it, and that is going along with her because we see her use it and take it out. And I think she still has access to Abernathy's control module. And another person that is very unlikely that I actually discounted earlier is, I think one of these control modules or pearls, excuse me, is Angela. Now, I know last time we saw Angela, she's the host that seduced the soldier. She ended up pulling the pin on the grenade and they blew up the cradle. What we learned from them is that the cradle was actually, all the data has been destroyed. Nothing's left. But another thing we learned is that these brain capsules are bulletproof. When Teddy shoots himself in the head, it bends the bullet. The module is protected. And I think it is 100% that explosion, it didn't affect Angela's head. And we know that Charlotte is Dolores is in the mesa when she's reprinted as Charlotte. So I can almost guarantee that Dolores would have went down to the mesa, found that brain capsule, unhooked it, and took Angela with her. So I think that is one person that we can guarantee that she has also. So I think she has Bernard, Abernathy, and Angela. But at this point, it starts getting to hosts that aren't necessary. It's very uncertain. And I think at this point, it's a guessing game. But I think there's a couple of extrapolations you can make and a couple of predictions you can make based on the next two pearls of what they could be. First of all, what I said earlier is that Dolores has access to every single host that was in the flood. And what I want to draw attention to with this flood that is so important is that Teddy is in it. Teddy was floating dead in the water. And that's a very interesting key point here. And that's because Teddy never made it to the door. Teddy killed himself in that shack, which means that when Bernard flooded Westworld, it's kind of swooped Teddy up and took him to shore. So what that tells me is that all the hosts that were in that lake, they're not all the hosts from the door. They're hosts that have died in other places. And what that tells me is that Lawrence is probably very likely washed up on that shore. He was shot and killed by one of the security guards with William and Maeve. And Lawrence was left to die. And I think it's very natural that Lawrence was washed up by the water and washed on shore and taken into the mesa. And it would make sense to me that Charlotte or Dolores would take Lawrence's capsule because they go way back. They went on a journey to Escalante when Dolores went through with William. So I think he's a character that really resonates with Dolores, and I think Dolores would save Lawrence because he's been washed up to shore and he's been brought into the mesa, and I think that's a way that Charlotte or Dolores would rescue him. And at the same time, you need to bring characters into the show that the audience can root behind. And I personally, Lawrence is one of my favorite characters, which is really a weird thing to say because I feel like he's not in it compared to the other characters, but he's one of my favorite characters. And I think he's an important person to bring into season 3 because we have Dolores and Lawrence could potentially be in the real world. We have Bernard there as well. And we know that William escaped and William's going to be probably living in his mansion alone, suffering in silence with his sins. And I think Dolores is going to pay him a visit. And I think Lawrence is a good person to bring on the outside that could have a potential interaction with William. So I think Lawrence is another huge prospect that I want to happen. So that being said, I'm going to say for me, I think 100% it's Bernard, Abernathy, Angela. I'm very convinced it's going to be Lawrence. And that goes for one more host. And this one is a wild card. I'm going to say it's a surprise host that I think is going to shock the audience. And it's going to come out of nowhere because Charlotte managed to get into Ford's office. Ford could have printed a new host and left it for Dolores. He could have printed something unique for Dolores. It could even be a type of surprise host. We know that Bernard is a host, but he's based off of Arnold. Who's to say that Ford didn't print another host based off of a human? It could be Elsie, which doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't be Elsie, but it could be Elsie. It could be any other host that is based off of a human. And a part of me wants to say young William. It could be a host based off of young William to kind of replace Teddy because Dolores kind of sacrificed Teddy in episode 10. So it could be a young William, and that would kind of conflict with the old William, and who we know now is in the future timeline being tested for fidelity. And that could really factor in. Maybe they're comparing the old fidelity William against the young host William because he's original work based on the person who William actually is. So I think that's a possibility. But I think what's really important here is who it isn't. And I know I'm very convinced that, first of all, it's not Teddy. Teddy is not one of these printed control modules because we see Teddy downloaded to the Eden. It's not Akichita because Akichita has been downloaded to the Eden. Now he's in like a secret simulated society. But the most important thing is it is most definitely not, we're not going to see Hector, Armistice, Maeve, Clementine. We're not going to see any of those people who are involved in the door or the journey to the Eden. I don't think we're going to see anybody from there. The reason is because I believe that Charlotte or Dolores sees them for the first time when she's walking to escape. And what we learn here is that there was a clear distinction between the hosts who were close to the door, and some of the hosts weren't picked up by the water, or they were taken out of that situation and brought to this beach. And some were flooded in the lake, which Bernard saw. And I think they told us as an audience that Maeve, Armistice, Hector, all these hosts, or those three primarily, as Charlotte looks at them, it tells us that they were pulled away from the situation. They were never in the Mesa, and there was no situation ever where Dolores could have gotten their brain module. And I think that's very important because this show is called Westworld, and I don't think they're ready to leave Westworld yet. We have Dolores and Bernard. They're going to be leading the story outside of Westworld, leading that host rebellion, if you will. And it's important that they have Maeve, Armistice, Hector, all these key characters still in Westworld, because I think we're going to be jumping back and forth between these characters. That's why Felix and Sylvester are there, to probably bring back Maeve. And what's Maeve going to do? She's going to go help Armistice, help Hector, help all of her friends out. So I think that is very important, that these characters are left behind. And I think you can explore so much more there. Maeve could be there trying to help bring more hosts to consciousness, trying to help these hosts escape the park. And there are 3 more parks that we have to see that we haven't seen yet. We've seen Raj World, we've seen Shogun, and we've seen Westworld. There are many other worlds that they can explore, and they can do that with Dolores. So that's what I think. And there's other small hosts. Excuse me. There's other small hosts like Rebus. He was the guy who was recalibrated, and he was the kind of the asshole turned into a hero. And he was shot on the beach in the present timeline in episode 1. I don't think we're going to see him either. There's no way that Charlotte or Dolores could have gathered that module. So to sum it all up, I think, when Charlotte exits Westworld and she sees Maeve, Hector, Armistice, they were separated from the pack who were in the drowned lake. And Charlotte would have never had a chance to get them. So in order to understand who Dolores / Charlotte could have gathered, it's everywhere she had been. And that is the Forge, that's the Mesa, that's Ford's facility. And yeah, so long story short, I think we're going to see Bernard, Abernathy, Angela. And the reason why Abernathy is so significant is Dolores isn't going to give up on her father, and Bernard is the perfect person to try and fix Abernathy. So I think that's how those characters are going to work together. I think Angela has been saved from the cradle. I think Dolores went in there as Charlotte and captured her brain module. And I think Angela is the one who is in Charlotte's host body. I think she's fulfilling that role until they print her own body, or they could just play it off like she's Charlotte if they want to keep that actress around, which I'm sure that they will. So, yeah, and I think we're also going to see Lawrence, hopefully. I think Lawrence makes the most sense, and some kind of surprise host. What I will say, too, though, is Charlotte as a character, or the body of Charlotte, she is going to be in season 3, season 4. She's always going to be around. I don't think, from a production standpoint, she is an A-list star. She's right now coming off Thor Ragnarok. She's doing a lot of good roles. They're going to want to hold her down because she's one of the star power. So I think whether they keep Charlotte, the body, as Angela, or they give her a new character, then I think that's possible. And it wouldn't surprise me if you have Bernard, Abernathy, Angela, Lawrence, and then the 5th one is a surprise female host that we've never met before, and that Marble takes over Charlotte's character. So that's what I think based on the pearls. And I'm noticing that a lot of you are in the chat, so sorry, let me just check that out. Donald Parrish, +1 for Angela. Thank you. I agree. And it was an opinion I had before. I said that Angela is dead. She's gone. But then Teddy shot himself in the head and it bent the bullet. So it's like there's no way that her brain module would have been damaged in that explosion. And that is where Dolores has been. So it makes sense that she would have saved Angela in that situation. Programmer of video games. Do you think the host can have kids in the virtual Eden? What if they evolve and build their own civilizations? Also, do you think Ford is still around? And I'll answer your question with IC Spots, and good to see you, IC Spots. You were a huge supporter in season 1. I really appreciate that. Do you think Akichita will be back in season 3? And I think that all kind of goes together in this Eden society. So I think in the virtual Eden, it would be interesting if hosts could have kids. I just wonder if they would do it biologically, because they're a different species and they might want to push that in. So maybe they create their own young and they build their children progressively older bodies or something of that nature. I'd be really interested if they do pursue that. And you know what? I'm convinced now, thinking about it, that they will pursue it. And the reason why is I think Ford wants them to have normal lives. If you want to distinguish hosts from humans, I think they'll do biological. It's familiar with the hosts anyway. So I think they could biologically have kids in the in the Eden. And the reason why that's so cool is because the hosts are original work, and they're so unique because they aren't based on nature. This thing that the show talks about, that humans are flawed or they're never really free because they're a slave to their natural instinct. And I think that hosts being able to create beings in the Forge, I think are so important, because these things that are being created are products of a very unique new species. And I think that that could move forward to whole other plot points where the Forge is creating new life and new things. And then if Dolores is able to access this Eden and then transfer over these new lives, it's just like, it's literally evolution on a technological scale. And I think that would be a very interesting concept to explore, because they would be the first products of the originals, which I think is really cool. And I think most definitely in this society, they're going to build their own civilizations. I don't know if we're necessarily going to see it next year, but I think there's going to be a point in time where we see William and Grace in the very deserted Forge area. We know that they're going to go back to that location. We know that there's significance in that location. I think in season 4, season 5, however long they want to run this, they're going to go back there and they're going to have to access this Eden. And I think it's going to look a lot different than it does when we see it. It's not just going to be grass and mountains anymore. It's going to be a civilization that is so unique to the hosts. So it's going to be something that we've never seen before. I think it would be really cool if they could produce young, as I said before, or they're originals of originals. It would be very cool. It would mean the dawn of a new species, where it's like, and I think it makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, we biologically just, have a kid, whereas they would put their consciousness in a place, have the system create their child, and then they bring it into the real world. And I think that's how that would work. And do I think Ford is still around? Yes. I'll touch on that in a minute. With IC Spots' question and Akichita being in the Forge, I think Akichita will be back. I think they did a lot of character development with it. They dedicated a whole episode to him. I think Akichita is most definitely coming back. Do I think he'll come back in season 3? I don't think you can necessarily say that. I think Akichita will come back when Bernard or Dolores decide to come back to the Forge. And I think it could be in season 4 or whatever. And I think there we will see Akichita. I just think in season 3, I think it was a plot point that was wrapped up. And I don't think that they would go back to the Eden so soon, because I feel like they wrapped that up. It's done. I feel like it's going to be something that's going to be revealed that they have to go back to it. And I think that'll take place later. I think season 3 is too soon to come back to that. And returning to the Ford question, do I think Ford is still alive? Yes, I think he's around, but not in the way that you would think. What I mean by that is Ford is dead. He's gone. Ford printed himself into the cradle. He was living there for a bit. He put himself onto Bernard, and then Bernard completely wiped Ford off of his system. So Ford's gone. Ford is 100% dead. But I love the way they handled him in episode 10, where Bernard thought that he was listening to Ford this whole time, but really it was himself. And Bernard projects his own consciousness as Ford because they're so close. It's much like how Dolores was projecting her own consciousness as Arnold's voice. So I think Ford is going to come back because Bernard jumbled up his memories. And I think it's going to take Bernard some time to find himself again. So I think we're going to see a different rendition of Bernard becoming conscious again. And I think in that development, I think they're going to play it in a very unique way where Anthony Hopkins or Ford is going to come back. But really, it's Bernard's inner voice telling him what to do. It's his journey of consciousness. So I think that's how Ford is going to come back in season 3. And I remember saying it in all the older videos. I said Anthony Hopkins, the actor, he's older, but he's a legend. He's amazing at what he does. And I said that Anthony Hopkins is one of those actors where they're going to handle Anthony Hopkins by having him in a season, wrapping up everything, and then writing him back in the next season, and then completely finishing off his story, and then bringing him back in, just to make sure the storyline is safe. And I hate saying it, but he is older, and you can't be relying on him, an A-list older star, to push your franchise forward. So in season 1, they kill Anthony Hopkins. They kill Ford. So if something happens to the actor, they don't have to bring him back. But then in season 2, they brought him back in the cradle as Bernard's consciousness. But then they write him out because it was Bernard's voice the whole time. And then now in season 3, if Anthony Hopkins is still doing great, they'll bring him back in. And they'll bring him back in as Bernard's projected consciousness, I think. And until Bernard finds his own voice again. So that's what I think will happen. PJ of Ice and Fire, what do you think will happen to Maeve in season 3? I think Maeve is going to have... I think she's going to have a darker storyline because this storyline, she was chasing her daughter the whole time. And it really went nowhere. She did everything she could to rescue her daughter. And it wasn't... well, I guess she saved her daughter at the end of the day, but she can't be with her. So I think Maeve's goal is going to be to gather her people, the people that she loves, and bring them to freedom, bring them to safety. And she will probably want to escape. I think Maeve is going to have a very self-contained storyline where Dolores is out there trying to rule the world and Bernard is there trying to stop her. I think that Maeve is going to be in there talking to Felix and Sylvester, because I think the first thing Felix and Sylvester are going to do is bring her back online. I think from there, she's going to start putting plans forward to get... what's it called? To get Hector back, to get Armistice back, to get all of her allies back online. I think eventually she's going to get Ashley in on it because I think Ashley Stubbs is a host. I think that was very clear in his interaction with Charlotte. So I think Ashley said it himself. He said that my duties are strictly within the park. And I think Ashley is going to make a choice. And I think he's going to realize that he's a host or something of that nature. He's going to help Maeve on this journey. And then his key role, Ashley is going to have to change his fundamental drive. And that's what the journey Maeve is going to put all these hosts on, is the journey to consciousness. And I think she's going to do this with Ashley too, because in episode 10, Ashley says that it is my duty to stay here, safeguard the park. And I think at the end of season 3, Maeve is going to be ready to escape with some of the hosts. And I think Ashley is going to have to change that fundamental drive to, no, I don't need to protect the park anymore. My job, I'm elsewhere. I'm going to change my drive and be something else. And I think that will prove that Ashley has truly reached consciousness. And I think that Maeve will have a role in that. Much like I think Maeve will have a role in helping all the other hosts. And I think we're going to be introduced to more host characters. And I think Maeve is going to build that. And I think Maeve, I'm pretty sure we'll see Maeve go into new parks. This season, more than I thought, wanted to show us new parks. They showed us the Raj. They showed us Shogun World. And I think Maeve could most definitely return to Shogun World to look for Akane, to look for Musashi, to look for all these characters. And I think she would go to Raj World. She'd go to these different places and start helping these hosts, trying to get a team together. And I think that's going to be Maeve's role. And I think that leads into season 4. I'm planning way ahead, but that goes into season 4 where, like, say if Maeve is out and you have Bernard supporting the mesh, or I'm trying to find the right word, but the peace between people and hosts. Bernard is pushing that and he's fighting for that. And Dolores is fighting for human extinction because she believes that they're never safe unless the humans are dead. And I think Maeve is going to start siding with Bernard because, you know, much like Bernard, she's had very good relationships with humans. And she's had humans like Lee Sizemore who have like destroyed the hypothesis the show is trying to push on us. The show keeps telling us that humans' fundamental drive is to survive. But yet we see Lee Sizemore sacrifice himself for Maeve. We see Felix risk his life to choose against his own safety to go save Maeve. So she's in these interactions that are proving that the hypothesis that humans are these evil things are not true. That's why I think fidelity testing for William is so important, is that if you're Bernard and you feel like humans are not all bad, what do? You try and incorporate them in your body so they then can survive or they can compete. So that's why you do fidelity testing. You get these humans that are good people, like Sizemore, like Felix, who are willing to change their fundamental drive of survival, which proves consciousness. You take those people and you print them into human or host bodies so then they can survive in this new world. And I think that's going to be Bernard's stance. And I think that goes against what Dolores's stance is. So that was my long drawn out answer of what I think is going to happen to Maeve. Vlog this. Do you think maybe she printed the AI version of Logan? He would be a living library of the Forge in a sense. So you're talking about Dolores printing Logan as a module. What I will say is I think what I was talking about is the 5th marble. I think Bernard, Angela, Abernathy, Lawrence, and a special someone. I think that one can come from the cradle. Any marble in the cradle. It could be any one of those because Dolores could have went back and scavenged for it as Charlotte. It could be anybody in the Forge because Dolores could have gone back and scavenged for that. I just think that Dolores as a character would have no intention of bringing on Logan. I don't know the value that Logan has to her or the value that he would have to her team. Because Logan was specifically created, because that Logan that we saw in the Forge, it wasn't really Logan. It was not a belief, but it was a creation of who James Delos believed Logan was, along with his purpose to solve humans. And you know what? The one thing that where I would believe you is she would want to bring Logan because he supports her belief that humans are simple-minded, and it helps her on her journey of exterminating them because they're so simple. And I would say she could use Logan for his information and his intelligence, but I think Dolores pretty much got that when she scanned all the books. She has all that information on her. So other than that, I don't know if she would take him with her. But as I'm talking, I'm starting to convince myself that, yeah, it's very possible. Very, very possible, actually. The more I think about it, the more I think you're right, actually. So what I'm thinking about is Bernard, for example, is based off Arnold. He's still a host, but he's based off another character, even though he's become his own thing. Logan was based off a human, but like Bernard, has become his own character. And I think Dolores will respect that. She could take him with her and he could actually help in the journey. So you know what? I think you just convinced me that Logan is a huge potential candidate because she could have got him from the Forge before she left. So very good call, Vlog this. I think that's a very legit claim. And as I was answering your question, I started to realize that it is more and more possible. Yeah, so I do agree with you. I see spots at the programmer of video games. Curious, too, about whether the show will introduce hosts having children. Oh, yeah, so that's the conversation we had earlier about the host being able to have children. I think it's a very smart thing to introduce because it introduces that question that all of us have. Like, they're fighting and they're immortal, and there's no way that they could biologically have children. And it makes total sense where their process would be, oh, so this is how we make a child. I take my brain module, my consciousness, I put it in a simulation. We then have a child in that world, and then that piece of code, that being that is created in the cradle or the forge, can then be taken out and put into a body. And then there you have a individual who was created biologically from your characteristics, but it was calculated by the forge. So I think it makes a ton of sense. And that's the only way that I think you could properly explain or appropriately explain the hosts actually having their own children versus just creating them. Because if you create them, it's based on what you're just creating them. But if you put them in a simulation and you have the simulation dictate what being would come from two characters having a child, then that is essentially how you have a kid. And then they would take that and bring it in the real world. So I think that is definitely a possibility. And on again, what's going on? I think we'll see more of Shogun World next season. They would have spent all that money for just one episode. Yeah, so Shogun, I think I'll be interested if we see Shogun. What I will say, though, is we're not going to see any more of Shogun World. And what I mean by that is we're not going to see more of Shogun World in Season 3 than we did in Season 2. I think if we get Shogun World, it will be short. It will maybe take up one episode, much like this season. And I think it would be Maeve on that journey, maybe to find Akane or Musashi or whatever. And I think they won't focus on Shogun World so much. And one key reason, and why am I losing my train of thought? One key reason is that it wasn't well received. I don't think people received Shogun World well. I don't think people, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about the general audience. The general audience doesn't like reading subtitles. They don't like, they just don't, they're not interested in Shogun World. I don't think that's going to stop the producers of the show. I just think the story takes, the bulk of the story will take place in Westworld because that's where everything's happening. I think Shogun World would be a little intricate addition because of a couple characters there that we know. Maybe I still don't know her name, the Japanese version of Akichita, or not Akichita, of Armistice, might want to go back there for some reason. I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be used sparingly for that reason. All right. Monreal, who do you think Dolores and Hale's body carried in those balls that were in her purse? I answered the question in such detail, like 5 minutes into this live stream. To sum it up, Bernard, Abernathy, Lawrence, Angela, and an unknown. And this unknown could be a character that's going to fill up Charlotte Hale's body. It could be a random woman character that we don't know, or it could be a character like someone mentioned in the chat. It could be Logan. Logan, who was created in the Forge. The reason why Dolores would want to take him is because he has valuable information, even though she does have that. But another reason is that that's not Logan's consciousness. It is a figure or simulation on what is believed who Logan was. I think he's a very important star of the show. I think they're going to want to bring the actor back. And I think that Dolores would want to give him a chance because much like Bernard, he's based on Arnold, and Bernard ended up finding himself. And this Logan character, he's based on Logan, but it's about him creating himself and finding his own identity. So I think that is a huge possibility. And I think Dolores might have sympathy for him because Logan was created as a slave in the Forge. He was produced to just work and understand the human condition. And I think for that reason, Dolores might want to rescue him. I see spots. I like the Akijita actor in other projects, so would have liked to see more character development from him in future seasons. I totally agree. He did a unbelievable job in this season, and I know a lot of people, based on some criticisms I heard about the show, some people say that there isn't enough emotional beats or character development, and I think what they did with Akijita was fantastic. The development that they had in his character and how they dedicated one episode to him and he ended up becoming a fan favorite. I think that really speaks to how well they handled the character and how popular he is. So that's why I'm a little upset when he makes it into the door and he's just in a simulation now. But that's not to say he won't come back, because I think he'll come back in like season 4 or something. The programmer of video games. I would like to see Lawrence return for season 3. Maybe he is one of the pearls. Totally agree. I think he's one of the pearls. As I said before, I think in the group of drowned people in the pond that Bernard said that he killed, Teddy is in there. Teddy was not near the door. Teddy killed himself in a shack. And so what that tells us is that when Westworld flooded, it picked up bodies from everywhere and it brought them to this place. And we saw Lawrence die in relatively the same vicinity. So I think Lawrence was in that pond. And I think Charlotte, or Dolores in Charlotte's body, was able to go in the mesa, find Lawrence, and she resonates with Lawrence because they went on a journey before together. And I think there she would take Lawrence. And I think he's a fan favorite. I think it'd be stupid not to bring him back. And yeah, that's what I think. Casper LaVega. What if inside Hale's body is Ford? Maybe Bernard. Maybe Bernard needs to get Maeve to fight with him against Ford and Dolores. And favorites fight with each other. Also, the way Hale moved seemed like Ford. Analyzing. What I will say is I love your theory. I think that I think calling on Charlotte's acting looking like Ford analyzing might be a bit of a stretch. But hey, I like the idea. The favorites against... See, that somewhat works. I think the issue there is Ford was completely destroyed. I'm just trying to understand how Ford's module could have gotten in the hands of Dolores, because what we see is that Ford downloaded himself. So what I'm led to believe is, since Ford downloaded himself onto Bernard, either he copied himself or he totally downloaded himself, which left his marble totally vacant. And I think Dolores feels about Ford the same way she feels about William. And she hates William now. And I don't think she likes Ford. I don't think there's a point in bringing back Ford. And I think Ford's motive to protect the hosts, I think he's past that now. They've escaped. And I think his role is done. I don't think Dolores as a character would resurrect him or would want him back. As I said before, I think Ford is going to be in next season, and I think he's going to be there through Bernard. I think Bernard messed up his memories. I think next season they're going to have a new cool way of showing us how Bernard is reaching consciousness again, because he messed up all of his memories. And I think Ford is going to come back through Bernard because it's going to be Bernard's own voice, but he's going to misinterpret it and apply it to Ford until Bernard finds his own voice. And then I think Ford is going to kind of disappear forever. So I think that's the role Ford is going to play, because I think everything Ford ever wanted has now been wrapped up. You know, he wanted to make sure Maeve got to safety. He wanted to make sure the hosts made it out of the park so they stood a chance. And I think that's pretty much happened. So I don't see Ford. I like the idea, but I don't see Ford necessarily coming back. And PJ of Ice and Fire, thank you so much for that $15 donation. I really appreciate that. That is so very nice of you. And she says, thank you for spending time answering my question. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the donation. I really appreciate it. It's very nice of you. Vlog This says, thank you for answering my question. I love your videos. You put a lot of work and thought into them. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I might try and get a couple more for Westworld, and then that's going to be wrapped up. And then maybe I'll do some news videos on Westworld. Let me know what you guys think. Just talking about casting news and stuff like that. But I think we're going to slowly start making way for Game of Thrones, which is kind of exciting. And for those of you who are just Westworld fans, please start watching Game of Thrones. It's an excellent show. And I have content that you can watch through season 6 all the way through. And I'm also going to be watching Game of Thrones from season 1 soon. So you can watch it along with me. So that'd be fun. Montreal, I don't know if this was talked about earlier, but what do you see happening more? Or what do you expect to see happening more with Dolores' father? Hale uploaded the data, but as we know, the real Hale is dead. So what could be happening to him? So I think Dolores has Abernathy's control module. I don't think she would ever like get rid of it or discard of it. I think she has that, you know, no matter what, she's loyal to her father, and I think she's going to hold on to him. And I think that's one of the reasons why Bernard is so important, is because I think maybe Abernathy was cured when the key or his module was used to open it. Maybe it took the virus out. Or maybe Bernard is going to have to fix Abernathy next season. But outside of for Abernathy, what I will say is the only thing I can say definitively about Abernathy is I think that he is with Dolores. I think he's in the Pearl. And I think he's going to be one of the last ones printed, because I think Dolores is going to want to make sure he's fine, he's uncorrupted. But even if he is, I think she's going to print him a body and put him on that journey of self-discovery, of finding the maze, because then he'll be able to look through, like in season 2, he was jumping between different characters. And I think he'll jump between different characters, and that's him getting his timelines mixed up until he finally finds himself and finds consciousness. And then Abernathy will be conscious. And, he'll realize all the storylines he's been on, all these different adventures he's been on. And I think I hope Abernathy comes back to form, but I do think he'll be a bit different. Like Dolores, for example, how she's not the sweet rancher's daughter anymore. She has a straight accent. She doesn't talk Western anymore. She doesn't have a Southern accent. And I think Abernathy will be similar. I think he'll go through that experience. He'll be a bit of a different character, but I think the core will still be there. He'll still feel like he's Dolores' father because they spent so long together. So I think that's the relationship that they will have. And I think he'll end up helping. I think the cannibal, or the storyline that he had previously where he was like a psycho, I think it's going to show that he is Dolores' father, because I think they're both going to share similar motives that the humans must go. So I think her father will take Dolores' side, and I think Abernathy and Dolores will together fight to get rid of the humans. What else do we got here? PJ of Ice and Fire. That's too bad about the lack of interest in Shogun World. I guess I can't expect everyone to love Japanese history like I do. Yeah, no, I get it. I think what I read, a lot of people are annoyed with the handling of Shogun World. The people are funny. Like, a lot of people don't like reading subtitles. A lot of people didn't want to be introduced to this new world. They just wanted to focus on the existing characters. So I think, yeah, if Shogun is introduced, it's going to be used sparingly. We'll come back to maybe Musashi Urakane or someone of that nature. Carbon Snail, are we still live? We definitely are live. If you guys aren't getting anything, let me know, but I'm pretty sure we're still live and we're doing good. So what's going on, Carbon Snail, or Carbon Snail? Robert Mugabe asks, season 2 episodes 1 to 9 were great, but episode 10 was pretty bad. Listening to your theories had me ready for an epic, mind-blowing finale, but I was left feeling sad that I felt nothing at the end. What I will say, and I don't want to sound, and check me if you think I'm sounding a little bit too like naive or you know, just doubting the show. I appreciated 1 to 9. I thought it was awesome. And I did think episode 10 didn't capitalize on the plot points that they set, but I've accepted it. And I think that you can move forward in an effective way with this show. But what I will say is that this season caught me off guard, because season 1 was such a tight-knit package. It felt like a movie. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. A movie. You follow this girl, Dolores, as she finds herself, and then she takes a stand, and boom, that's it. It's done. Everything that they introduced, like Bernard being a host, everything, it was so well done because everything had an answer, and it left very few questions for the next season. This season was different because I feel like the producers were like, hey, we're onto something. And in order to keep the show rolling, you need to integrate plot points for season 3, for season 4, for season 5. You need to keep people around, and you can only spin your wheels for so long until you have no stories left to tell. And I feel like this season, like even they did like the post-credit scene with the Man in Black at the end, testing for fidelity. That whole fidelity storyline that we were following, literally, like that's what's so crazy about this season is that every single fidelity scene that we saw, every single thing with James Delos, every single thing on his journey trying to transfer consciousness, that whole concept of conscience transfer, I thought that was going to be the meaning of season 2, but it wasn't. That whole plot point was literally hinting for season 3 and season 4. So what I will say is that season 2 might seem a lot better when we see season 3 and season 4 and so on. And that's because I think they're holding answers. And I think I got to say my theories, not to toot my own horn, but like, I think my theories were like really good. So I think what I mean by that is that I don't think they're done. I think the theories that I've developed on this channel and some other people have done online, I don't know what other theories people are talking about, but the stuff that I've said, I think we shouldn't rule it out. I think it is most definitely possible because this season didn't operate like season 1. This season set up a ton for what's to come. And I think they did a pretty good job doing it. But I think where the show suffered and why people were disappointed in episode 10 is because it didn't answer any questions. It left the questions for season 3, season 4, season 5, whatever. So I think the whole concept of the door, fidelity testing, transferring consciousness, that's going to be something that they're going to address in future seasons. So I think that's what we can expect is, I think someday William is going to transfer into a host body, young William. That was my Door to Dolores theory. And if you watch it, it would have played out really well if it all happened in season 2. But now I'm starting to think that my video on the Door to Dolores, it can still happen. And the pieces are still there for it to happen. I just think it will happen in a different way. And I think it will happen later in the show. So, yeah, I think there's still a lot of story to tell. And, yeah, I think because it was a popular show, they didn't write it like season 1. It didn't have a beginning, middle, and end. It had a setup for the next season because they're trying to tell a story that spans years. So, yeah. The programmer of video games. Do you think we will get a flashback of young William talking with a younger Ford next season? I think you can take seeing young William to the bank. I don't know how. I don't know why. But I think you can take it to the bank. We're going to be seeing Jimmy Simpson. And that's because he's very popular in the show. He's a great actor. And whether it's through Dolores, looking through her memories, whether it's Logan, if we see Logan printed back into a new body, I think we will see young William back. And I think young William plays a significant role. And I'm going to go on a quick rant. And why he plays a significant role is what I'm starting to see is when I first watched episode 10, I got a little bit upset because I took what they were telling me at face value. And I think the producers are also trying to throw us for a loop, is that the producers of the show seem stuck on the theory that humans are evil because they are controlled by nature. And their drive, every single human's drive is to survive. And that was their hypothesis. And that's what Logan said in episode 10. And he said, what we discovered is humans aren't complicated. We have a basis of code. We simplified it as much as possible. And they do the same thing every time. And I think that this season presented it as an answer, but I think in future seasons, they're going to start presenting it as a question. And that's why it's going to be Dolores versus Bernard, because Dolores believes that humans are all bad. Their code is they're meant to survive, that we're better than them, blah, 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 blah. That's her point of view. Whereas Bernard is like, wait a second. And Maeve will be on Bernard's side, where it's like, wait a second. I've known good people who sacrificed themselves, who have gone against their own drives to protect me. We've seen that with Sizemore. We've seen that with Felix. We've seen that with Arnold. Arnold killed himself to protect the host. We've seen that even in Ford. Ford killed himself so the host could be free. So what this means is that there's a serious debate on whether humans are good or evil. And I think William is going to hold the key, because William is a very unique character where he's seen as this evil being. But the truth is that that is a person who was created from a very good person. William, going into the park 30 years ago, was a very great person. And his experience with Dolores ruined him, because the person who he fell in love with forgot about him. And then from there on out, William has defined his character, or his whole being, as the billionaire philanthropist, or the man in black. And what's so key here is that every single person that he's produced in the park, he thinks that choices dictate who a person is. But William is the only character who has made choices to hide who he truly is. You know, he pretended to be the rich father, the husband, everything, the white picket fence kind of guy, to hide that he belonged in another world. He belonged in Westworld. And they established that in episode 9. William said, I belong in the wrong world. And right when I heard that, I'm like, boom, we're going to see William walk through the door and become young William. And I think that's the key, is that it's about, are humans good or bad? And this being, this man in black, who is seen as such this negative figure, he's been damaged, and he's a character based off of what people have seen, but not what people have seen inside. We even see Ford, when he throws the card, William's profile, to him, and he says, you might not like what you see. And I think that's William, or I think that's Ford telling William, this isn't necessarily an accurate portrait. He's seen as a psychopath, because every time he goes in, he's the evil man in black. And he says in season 2, he says it himself, like, I thought that there were no stakes. That doesn't make him evil. And I think that's the whole thing with William, is that he proves, even though he's seen as this evil thing, every choice that he's ever made is to hide who he is. And I think that's who William is as a character. He's a very important, to me, he's my favorite character in the show. He's the most in-depth, dark character in the whole show. There's a lot to be done with William. And I think we're going to see younger William next season, to answer your question. And I think he's going to walk through the door and become a host. I was convinced it was going to happen this season, but I think they're going to delay it. And I think he feeds into that debate, whether humans are good or whether they're bad. And there's two sides. There's Dolores, there's going to be Abernathy, and then there's Bernard, there's Maeve, and there's going to be a civil war, a separation between what is right and what is wrong. Is it right to kill all the humans because their fundamental drive is to survive? They're flawed. Or is it right to protect humans because not all humans are bad? Look at Sizemore, look at Felix, look at Ford, look at Arnold. They've all gone against their core code and have killed themselves to save others, to save hosts. And William fits right in there, because he's seen as this evil figure that Dolores and or potentially Abernathy, but Dolores believes that is evil. But he's a character that was rooted in being a good person, and everything he's ever done is just to hide who he is. So I think he's a very important character moving forward. What else do we got here? Montreal, do you see any potential of Teddy returning for season 3 or future seasons? No, I think Teddy's gone. I think Teddy falls in the boat with Akichita, where all the characters that have went through the door and are in this Eden, I think we're not going to see them in season 3. I think there's going to be some type of plot point where they're going to say, hey, We need to go and see this society. And I think we could see a new civilization that we've never seen before. And we could revisit Teddy. We can revisit Akisha and all those characters. Excuse me. But I don't think that's going to happen in season 3. And what I do think, though, is Teddy is going to leave, and Dolores doesn't have a love interest. And I'm beating myself over the head. I think it's going to be young William. I think not next season, but I think there's going to be some point where young William is going to be reprinted as a host, and I think he's going to fill the role of Teddy, because really at the end of the day, Teddy took William's role for 30 years. And I think now it's time for young William to come back to Dolores, because their paths always come back together. And I think he's going to finally go back to Dolores and fill that role. What do we got here? Yexeria Ortiz. Sorry if I butchered your name. Is there a possibility to have a copy of the hosts? I think host Charlotte is super important inside Delos and what Dolores is planning with the park and her plans. I think Dolores would want to have control. I don't think they're going to do a clone thing. Just because I feel like if they were going to pull off that plot point, they'd have to, you need to set it up more. Like I can't, in season 3, they're going to be like, here's this new copy that we didn't tell you, but Bernard created. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think Bernard, who was creating Charlotte's body, I think he wouldn't have time to even print a pearl based on Charlotte's likeness. I just think that is very, very unlikely. I think Dolores now is big picture. I think she thinks I made it out of Westworld, and now my focus is the real world. And I think her having control over the park is irrelevant to her. And I think it's not going to focus on that. The Westworld Park storyline is going to focus in on Maeve. It's going to focus on her control. I think she's going to be trying to have control. I think she's going to bring back her friends, Hector, Armistice, all these people. And we'll see her with Sylvester, Felix, and Ashley Stubbs. And I think that's going to consist of the story in the park. But yeah, Carbon Snail, BuzzTox. I think that the character Angela could be used as a seductress of sorts, and could also manipulate her in the outside world to aid the host cause. I agree. And it's like, I hope that she gets out of that character role, because I think Angela as a character could be much more than just a seductress. But they really played on that point hard in this season, which was one of the downfalls of the show that I didn't like, is the whole thing with Angela seducing the soldier and pulling the grenade on the pin. I thought that was cheesy. I think you'd have to be a really dumbass soldier to do something that stupid. So I think that was a little ridiculous. I think they could have played the scene a lot better and made Angela look like more of a manipulator instead of just a seductress. So she could be used in that role. I feel like she could be used for so much more. And I think, yeah, that's what I think about Angela. Because yeah, I think they've said, I don't know where I've heard this. I've heard this somewhere, but like they say like the character has like, is like this perfect, position of beauty. Like she has, like nobody can like avoid her because she's designed mathematically to appeal to the majority. I'm not necessarily sure if that's correct, but I remember hearing that somewhere, so I thought I'd just bring it up here. But no, I think Angela's going to play an important role. She's Dolores's right-hand girl, I guess. So I think she's going to help Dolores do whatever necessary to get the humans back on top. But yeah. What else do we got here? I see spots. Missed most of your season 2 reviews. Definitely going to rewatch season 2 and watch your reviews. Great analysis. Oh, thank you so much. I got to say, I see spots. The reviews I did on Westworld season 2, I'm pretty damn proud of them. I like the recaps I did. I like the theories that I dived into. I think it dives into concepts that are relevant for season 3 and season 4. I think it goes into a lot of just like theories and shit. I don't know. But the favorite thing I love talking about is, and I wish they did it this season, and I hope to God they do it next season, because it's like the first season focused in on the maze. The maze is this symbol that represents one's own journey to consciousness, and of a host to go through the maze and find their own inner center. And that's what a maze is. It's a very complicated, confusing journey where in the middle, you find yourself. I thought this season would make sense if it was the door. Ford told William to go find the door, and that storyline went nowhere. So I don't think I made a bunch of theories about the door, but since they didn't answer it this season, I think we're going to see the door in future seasons. And I think the door, for me, no question, and I thought this in episode 2 moving forward, is the maze is the journey for one's own inner self. The door is the journey or the transition from one world into another, or one body into another. So what that essentially means is fidelity testing. The door means that you can walk from a human mind into a host body effectively without your mind turning to mush. And it feels like they haven't solved that issue yet. So that's what I think the door is. So I think Ford set William up for a really long journey of going through the door, because I think he will go. Well, we see him technically trying to go through the door as an old host. I just don't like how they handled that. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Carbon Snail. Oh my God, $10. Thank you so much for that donation. Very nice of you. Really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for your donations. And Carbon Snail says, what series do you think will win more Emmy Awards this year? Game of Thrones or Westworld? Both are in the running. Which is your favorite? So I've been a diehard Game of Thrones fan for a long time. I got to say, though, season 7, I thought could have been done better. There's certain things with season 7. Season 6 was so good. Game of Thrones season 6 was unbelievable. And season 7, I feel like they tried to speed things up. I feel like they wrote things that I thought didn't necessarily make sense. I would have done it differently. But overall, it was still a good season. But it was a short season. Westworld season 2, I loved it. I thought it was perfect right up until episode 10, because I feel like everything that they were introducing from episode 1 to episode 9 paved the way for an excellent finale. It's just they didn't capitalize, and they didn't answer the questions that needed to be answered. It was not a satisfying conclusion. So what I will say is that the first 9 episodes of Westworld I like more than Game of Thrones season 7. I'm going to give it to Game of Thrones, just because even though they talked about capturing a white, I thought that was so dumb that they captured a white. And I live in Canada, okay? I'm familiar with ice and snow. And ice doesn't just break when they get in the middle of the island and the White Walkers all crumble and fall through the ice. That doesn't just happen, guys. Like ice is frozen. They're in like the Arctic. It doesn't happen. So there was a lot of points with that episode I was upset. But I would say at least Game of Thrones capitalized and took home the plot points that they introduced. Whereas Westworld, I feel like I was left disappointed with episode 10. I liked it, but I think Game of Thrones is going to get more Emmy nods, just because I think it resonates more with our culture. I feel like a lot of people and a lot of critics are dropping Westworld because they don't want to have to think through the episodes. They don't want to have to try and solve everything. And it's a lot more than that. But I think Game of Thrones does a great job at character development. And I think that really kills with award shows. So even though I thought that there were issues with Game of Thrones season 7, I think their dedication to character development, and we've been with these characters for so long, and their set pieces, their action pieces, the money that goes into the show, I think Game of Thrones will sweep. I think Game of Thrones will do a lot better than Westworld, because I think the things that Westworld can win on is like, I think Westworld, the one category Westworld could beat Game of Thrones in is actors. I think the performances given by every single person are not true. I think Dolores, Abernathy, all these host characters, Ed Harris, Anthony Hopkins, all these people, Evan Rachel Wood, they all are tremendous actors. And I think, if anything, Westworld would beat Game of Thrones in performance. because Abernathy in season 1, I still look back to it. That was an amazing performance. Programmer of video games. And once again, thank you so much for that $10, Carbon Snail. I really appreciate it. The programmer of video games. Man in Black could be seen as the villain in the host perspective, or Logan, because he did leave him stranded in a desert and took over his spot in Delos. I totally agree. And I think the issue with William is that everyone who everyone who has a perception of William, like Logan or everyone looking from the outside in, thinks that they know William, but they don't. And that's what makes him so complicated, is that William has created this formula to judge people based on the choices they make. He can figure out who somebody is based on every choice they make. And I think people like Logan, people like Dolores, and all these others, they never will truly understand who William is, because every single choice William has made is to hide who he truly is. And who he truly is a man, a human, who feels like he belongs in the wrong world. He's a traitor of his own kind. So that's why I think nobody would truly ever understand William, because he's a character who, like they say in the show, their human nature. Humans are very simple people, simple-minded. And their nature is to survive. Well, William is a human who doesn't even want to be a part of human society. He wants to be a part of the hosts and the host world. So I think he is a very, very unique character. And I really want them to flesh out William more. Nancy Foroki. Sorry, I mispronounced your name. Do you think Maeve will resume her escape as Ford wanted? Yes. I think that's season 3. I think she's going to get her people, Hector, Armistice, all those people. She's going to use her friends, Felix, Sylvester, Ashley, and I think she's going to, and she might go to New World. She might go to the medieval world. She might go to these new parks. She might go back to Shogun World to try and gather people or hosts to take them to safety. So I think that is what she will do, and I think she'll get that party, and then she will try to escape. So I think that's Maeve's role. I see spots. Armistice wasn't developed much, but I still love her character. Gave some comic relief at times. I agree. I do. Armistice, I never think of her as like my favorite character. Like if she never came around again, I'd be fine with it. Like I don't love her character, but she is nice to have around. And I think we're going to be seeing, she's a good muscle kind of a character with Maeve. She's a good person to have around to be the muscle. So I think we're going to see her back in Westworld. And I think we're going to see next season's going to be unique because we're going to see more characters fleshed out. Secondary characters, I think, are going to be given primary character status. I think Angela is going to be more of a developed character. She's someone who's always been around, but we've never really had good development. I think we're going to see more with her. Lawrence, I hope he comes back. I think he will come back. I think they're going to give him more development outside of William. I think it will be important to see Lawrence as a character breathe outside of his interactions with William, and we can start identifying him as a primary character, a character that we can root for. Because I think that's important in season 3 at this point. They've done a good job with Bernard and some other characters, but they need to start giving us hosts that we can root for. But at the same time, they have to give us humans who we can root for. So I think all those characters, some characters they're going to pick who have been in the show for the 2 seasons already, like Angela is a perfect character. Lawrence is a perfect character. Hector. These characters that we're familiar with, and really give them more of a spotlight so they can shine and we can learn more about them. And much like Akichita was shown briefly in season 1, very small part, but they fleshed him out really well in season 2. And I think they're going to do that with other characters. PJ of Ice and Fire. I agree with what you said about season 7. A lot of the fans felt the same way. Thank you. Yeah, I was season 7. I had good prediction. I did a prediction series for Game of Thrones season 7. I predicted 1 through 6. I also have my Game of Thrones like special videos, like Jon Snow, Azor Ahai, Bran, Three-Eyed Raven, stuff like that. And I developed those theories much like Westworld, where I look at everything and how it pieces together to finish with that plot. And a part of me was disappointed that they didn't go with my prediction, but it's ridiculous for me to think that. But at the same time, I feel like some plot points with Game of Thrones were a bit lazy. I got the capture of White was the stupidest plot point I think I've ever heard, but whatever. That's my opinion. I see spots. Agree. Great actors on Westworld. Must be difficult to switch emotions and accents, etc. In a moment's notice. Yeah, I agree. And that's another thing. Like, I love all the actors in Game of Thrones, but Westworld, they're tested. They have to jump back and forth from emotion to no emotion to accent to no accent. Like it's crazy. It's crazy stuff. But there's some like Charlotte Hale, for example. I think she did a good job, but playing Dolores, she sucked. Like, she's like, "Thank you for saving me, Bernard." Like she was so like no emotion. She played Dolores not very well. So that was one part of Westworld where I was a little iffy on it. Carbon Snail, right on. Thank you for the outstanding in-depth answer to my question. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I think we're going to go for maybe 10 more minutes, and then I'm going to wrap it up, which sucks because this is the last true Westworld live stream I think we're going to do. I think I might try and do one more Westworld video. We'll see what I can get together, and then we'll see how long of a wait we have for season 3. Because it sounds like the producers of the show are still kind of writing. They're still trying to figure out the direction they want to go. They do know that they're going to focus on Bernard and Dolores a lot outside of the park. But I wonder when we're going to get it. Are we going to get it in a year and a half? Are we going to get it in 2 years? I think it could be a pretty long wait. So I don't know. And I've been reading some stuff of what the producers have been saying. They said that they're now going into new territory because they're out of the park. And it's going to focus on Bernard and Dolores, which I think is going to be a really interesting dynamic, especially since they both want different things. So I think that's going to be cool. And Lisa Joy, the producer of the show, actually came forward and told us that there is a creature inhabiting Hale's body. So it's going to be interesting to find out who has taken over Hale's body. I personally think it's Angela. Until she prints her own body, or it could be a random new character that we haven't really met yet, but I think that would be cool. And I read a couple quotes. John Nolan said, he said this: "Not all of our favorite characters have managed to escape yet. There could be an opportunity to visit other parks in future seasons." And so I think that hints at, first of all, we can expect to see maybe Raj World, Shogun World, or New Worlds. And I think it's important that he said that not all of our favorite characters managed to escape with Dolores. Like, I feel like a lot of people were like, "Oh, Dolores managed to get Maeve, Hector Armistice, all these characters." And I think what he's saying is that's not the case, because I think it's important for Maeve to hold down Westworld, because the show is still called Westworld. And I think there is a lot that could be dived into in Westworld. So that's why I think we could expect to see Lawrence, Angela, Bernard, Abernathy, and some unknown character, and some surprises. They told us that we could expect to see some new surprises. And I love that comment. I forget who it was, but Logan would be a great person to have in a Pearl. Dolores could have taken Logan from the Forge. And the reason why she would take him is because, first of all, his knowledge and information, but another reason is that he is a slave and he is in chains in this simulation. He's stuck. And he's not Logan, really. He's like Bernard more than anyone. He's a character that was based off of a human, but isn't. He's original work. And I think for that reason, Dolores could very much rescue Logan. And it would be great for the show, because they'd be able to bring back the actor. And I'm sure that they love the actor, him and Jimmy Simpson. They did such a great job in season 1. I think they're going to be trying to bring them back as much as possible. And if you bring back Logan for season 2, that factors into maybe us seeing young William. Jimmy Simpson, we'll get more flashbacks with him, understanding on his character. So I think there's a lot that can be done with the pearls, and it makes me very excited. Monreal. So in season 1, we saw Teresa freeze as a host in Bernard's memory. Sorry, I need to read that again. So in season 1, we saw Teresa freeze as a host in Bernard's memory. Is there any potential that Bernard would bring her back for the same kind of purpose? Man, I wish I remembered your reference. Teresa freezes in Bernard's memory. Oh, I think I know what you mean. Bring her back for some kind of purpose. I don't think Bernard would bring back Teresa. I think that plot point is dead. I think it's done. And the reason why I say that is I feel like bringing Teresa back serves no purpose. You know, she worked management for the park and she wanted to smuggle information out. So they killed her. I feel like bringing her back would provide nothing. It would provide no new plot. It wouldn't really capitalize on anything that they've laid down before it. So I think Teresa's done. I think characters like Logan, for example, I just talked about him. I think he would be a much better candidate to bring back, like a human as a host. I think he'd be much better. So I don't think we're going to see Teresa just because I think the plot doesn't need it. And I think Bernard is past that point in his life. I know he was kind of in love with her, but no, because I think he would realize that no matter how much he would try to recreate Teresa, it's not Teresa. It's his imagination of Teresa. Would you want to be with someone who you created to be who you wanted them to be? You know what I mean? It's just not legitimate. I don't think it serves the plot. And I think Bernard's got a lot more to worry about than bringing back his lover. And I don't think that she would help him in any way pursue what he wanted to pursue. So that's what I think about it. Carbon Snail says that he thinks that there will be a 2-year wait. Or do I think that there will be a 2-year wait? I think it's possible. I think Westworld, let's think. Westworld season 1 came out in November, and Westworld season 2 came out in April. So that was like a year and a half. And it depends on what kind of release window they have in mind. I'm finding that HBO likes to release. You know what? I'm going to make a very daring prediction. HBO loves the window of April, May, that kind of area, because they want to have they're one of their top shows releasing in the summer for business. A lot of people are at home. It's more profitable as an organization to push your really high-ranking shows in the spring summer slot, and that's what they do with Game of Thrones. And Game of Thrones has owned that space. But now Game of Thrones is getting very long, very complicated. It's turning into a film set. So Game of Thrones is now taking longer. Game of Thrones was delayed, which ended up delaying Westworld. And Westworld season 1 released in November because Game of Thrones already had the spring slot. They would never play Westworld and Game of Thrones at the same time. Okay? The reason why Westworld played this spring is because HBO wanted to fill that summer slot with one of their strongest IPs. And Game of Thrones isn't back for a while, right? So they filled Westworld and Game of Thrones' spot. So what I think this means for Westworld Season 2 is I'm going to guess that Game of Thrones can be expected to release in June. I think next June we're going to get Game of Thrones. And I think because of that, either they're going to delay Westworld until next November, or they're going to delay it 2 years from now, April. And then that will be, it's so hard to explain what's going on in my head right now. But 2 years, they do Westworld in April, and then a full year to next spring, I think we're going to get the Game of Thrones spinoff. And I heard that they're going to be filming the spinoff relatively soon. So if they actually do, so let's say if they produce Game of Thrones for next year, a new Game of Thrones spinoff, I think I need a calendar. This shit's getting confusing. What I want to say is that Westworld and Game of Thrones share a relationship. Game of Thrones is always going to take priority and take the spring slot, and that defaults Westworld to November. But if Game of Thrones isn't around, Westworld is going to default to April. So if you want to know when Westworld is going to be released, it's going to be 1.5 to 2 years. If Game of Thrones is going to be released in April, then Westworld is either going to be released in the winter. If they don't have enough time for that, then they're going to delay it 6 months until next April. So I think we're looking at 2 years to 1.5 years. That was a very long, confusing, drawn-out way to answer your question, but I hope you understand. What else do we got here? PJ of Ice and Fire. I love the way you handled your chat questions in your live stream. I enjoyed it immensely. Thank you for all your time and knowledge. Thank you so much. That was really nice of you. And thank you so much for your donation. I really appreciate it. Thanks for supporting the channel. Nancy Forholke. Sorry, I can't pronounce your name. I believe Bernard will create an Elsie host. What do you think? They could, and it would be a way to bring back that actress, because I'm sure a lot of people like her character. I just think at this point, for Bernard, it's like she's dead. You know, what's the point of me bringing back something that's gone? And I think he's going to battle that with his son. I have the VAT here. Should I print my son back? But then it's like, is it really my son? I created him. And I think that's a question that he could be struggling with. This season, we saw him holding a picture of his son. And it's like, would you rather live with the passing of your son or print a shadow of who he was? So I think there's a debate to be had there. I know that Dolores says all the time that you live as long as the last person who remembers you. Elsie is always going to live as long as Bernard is living, because Elsie is in Bernard's mind. He remembers everything of who she was. So I think she always does have potential to come back. I just don't see the use of Bernard wanting her to come back. And what I mean by that is that Elsie is dead. She's not coming back. But what I will say is that Bernard is going to try and move humans into printed host bodies, but that's a different type of science. That's fidelity testing. That is literally transferring over consciousness. And I think since Elsie's dead, Bernard couldn't do that if he wanted to. So I think Bernard will bring people back, but they will have red control modules and they will be human based. There'll be fidelity tests. And that's what they introduced in season 2. So I think that's what they're going to do. I don't think they could do that with Elsie, because Elsie is dead. Unless here I go. I'm just digging myself into a giant hole here. Unless he remembers like a season 1 conversation or a season 2 conversation with Elsie, and he creates Elsie and does fidelity tests with a previous conversation he had with Elsie until the conversation goes exactly the same, much like what Dolores was doing with Bernard in the cradle. But I think there's more to it than that. But yeah, that's my input. So it's possible. And that answer underlines what I think of what Bernard's going to do. I think Dolores stands to kill everyone, and I think Bernard is going to try and transfer humans into host bodies. And that's the door that is fidelity testing, and he's going to try and do that before it's too late. So they're on an even playing field. The programmer of video games. Earlier in the season, Ford would communicate with William through the other hosts. In the cradle, I presume, right? When the cradle got destroyed and Ford escaped into Bernard. Ford would communicate with William through the other hosts in the cradle, I presume. When the cradle got destroyed and Ford escaped into Bernard. I keep reading your question, and I don't necessarily know what you're asking, programmer. Yes, Ford did communicate to Bernard through the cradle, which means that there is some type of connection between the cradle and the actual park. And I think when Ford went into Bernard, I think Ford left the cradle. I don't think there's a copy of him. I think he left into Bernard, and I think Bernard then killed Ford when he deleted him off his coding. So yeah, that's what I think happened. Oh, right here, the arc never got resolved. Like Ford completely forgot that he had a narrative for William. Yeah, see, this is where I'm very confused, and I was very disappointed in the show, is because in the whole season they had William go on this journey. Ford is like, I have built a story for you, and it's just for you, and it's called The Door, and you need to find the door. But then they played this door as a simulation for the hosts, but he said it was for William. So I thought that was a giant waste. And he had William go on this huge journey of self-discovery, and it was this big thing, and nothing ever got capitalized on it. That's why I think that this is going to play out in future seasons. I think they might do a stupid twist, being like, the door isn't a thing. It isn't a thing that you walk into. It was never meant for the hosts. It is a transition. And we're going to learn that the door is the transference into a host body. And William will be able to go to the place where he's always belonged, Westworld. He'll be able to live in that world. He'll be able to live in that body and have everything he ever wanted. And that goes into Nick T's question, what's going on with the Man in Black? What was the post-credit scene in the future? And I think this feeds into the door. I think the door, much like the maze, the door is the transference into a new body. I think that this William that they're testing right now is almost an illegitimate William, because he did make the same choices fidelity-wise, but it's based off of the megalomaniac that they've seen in the park. And it's not true to who William is as a character. And I think they're going to be testing on him, trying to understand him. I think Bernard is behind it. I think Bernard is going to try and do a lot of fidelity tests on humans to try and save them from Dolores. But he is a very unique character, the Man in Black. And I think William, I really want to see good William come back, because I keep saying this over and over again. Every choice William has ever made after being in Westworld is to hide who he truly is. And that is a man who belongs in Westworld, a man who was in love with Dolores. And that really damaged him. So I think there's a lot of depth that they could add to William. And the end credit scene really kind of threw me for a loop because Grace is there. And I think I'm going to just really throw it out there and say, like, the best guess I got is that I think that this is a Bernard thing. I think Bernard is running this initiative where, he is trying to bring back humans who don't share the values that Dolores and the Forge believe, that they follow human nature. I think he's trying to balance the tide. He's trying to save the humans by transferring them into hosts. And now that the fact that Grace is dead, I'm actually kind of confused why she's alive. There's got to be a very key reason. I need to think about this more, but thanks for the question. Brenda Starr, do you think Dolores will create a William host to control and take over Delos? That's the last thing I want to happen. I remember one of the things I said with William was, I hope they don't use William as a host to be a weapon. And then it's like a nod to the movies. Like, oh, it's the evil host Man in Black. They've finally created him. I really hope they don't do that. I think that would be a big mistake if they did that, because he's a really in-depth character. They might even do like a Terminator type thing where you have old evil William, who's based off of all the perceptions of who he is, and good young William, who's been printed by Dolores or by Bernard or by somebody. And that would make sense for Bernard to do. Maybe Bernard prints young William to try and psychologically fuck with Dolores. I think, I think there's a lot of possibilities there that I think we could see. Carbon Snail, Max, make sure you give us a heads up for your next Westworld chat. Though I'm a subscriber, I stumbled upon your chat by luck. Please send us an advance notice for your next Westworld chat. Thank you so much. Both Thank you for telling me that. Yeah, this one was kind of last minute. I put up a comment on my YouTube channel in the community section. I guess that never popped up. So yeah, I'll do better next time to try and send a warning, and I'll upload the chat before so people can actually see it and view it. I kind of uploaded that really quick. Sorry about that. What else do we got here? Nancy Forakati, I'm not great at your name. I believe Bernard is behind what is in the post credits of The Man in Black. I agree with you, and I need to see another season to provide more context. I don't think we're going to see that happen season 3. Much like what the producers of the show said, is that is far down the line. That's what we're building up to. So yeah, I think that's what we can expect. The programmer of video games, Emily in the post-credit scene is likely a host. 100%. I think she is a host. But since she's dead, can you test for fidelity? Can you properly transfer consciousness? Can you do what I'm trying to say is it a Bernard where he was created in Arnold's image, but really he's Bernard. He looks like Arnold. He sounds like Arnold, but he's not Arnold. He kind of built his own character, his original work. Is that what Grace is, or Emily? Is she based off of Emily and she kind of found her own character? Because we can see that she's disassociated with William, which would suggest that she's a memory. She is a basis off her former self, but isn't actually herself. And that makes sense with her disassociation with William. She doesn't call him Dad. She says William. Or it is fidelity tested. It is properly transferred human consciousness, and those are the red modules. So it's one of the two, and I'm sure we'll see which one it is. It's just really intriguing to see who could bring her back, because it has to be based off of memory, and not a lot of people are familiar with Grace. So we'll see what happens. Nick T, so did William kill a robot version of Emily? She said she wants in, but she would already have to be in before she died to become a host to test for William. I think William actually killed Emily. That was the true story that we saw. And up to that point in the future, they do fidelity tests and William ends up killing her every single time. So I think that this Emily is a host based off the one that we saw William actually kill. So yeah, that's what I think. The one in the post-credit scene is most definitely a host. I'm just trying to figure out why or who would create her, or what she's based off of. So yeah, that's my question. Brienne Rowe, I would love to see young William for a number of reasons. One, Jemmy Simpson does phenomenal work and he's very likable. Agreed. And two, his character dynamic was a powerful contrast to many other characters. I agree. I think he'd be the perfect person to bring back. He would kind of fill the hole of Teddy in Dolores's life. I'm going to stand by it. William is the most compelling character in this whole show. And it annoys me when I hear the producers of the show say that he's just this evil person, because they've told me in the last 2 seasons of Westworld that William is the most in-depth character out there. Episode 9 was completely dedicated to William. And it told us that he wasn't just an evil megalomaniac. He's a man who feels like he belongs in the wrong world. And I think that is so, so important. And I talk about that in my Door to Dolores video. And I think that's the best way to understand William. And I feel like at this point, there's no character in Westworld who understands William as a character. And I think there will come a time where Jemmy Simpson does come back as the person who he wanted to be. He always wanted to be the guy who was with Dolores. He always wanted to be the guy in Westworld. And since he couldn't, he donned a character so he could feel those things that he always wanted. Brienne Rowe, do you feel the overall emotional impact of the season was lacking versus season 1? Yes, I do. I thought up to episode 9, the show was perfect. Episode 10 for season 1 knocked it out of the park. They wrapped up everything perfectly. It was so well done. Whereas season 2, I think, fell flat. I think they could have done a lot better. I think things that they wrote didn't necessarily make sense. Like, you're telling me that it takes 2 shots for Maeve to die on this journey for her daughter, but at the end of the day, Dolores can take 5 shots and be totally fine. I just felt like there was no consistency, and I felt like they didn't answer the questions that they set out or asked in the first place. So I do think that season 1 had way more of an emotional impact than season 2, and I think that's a shame. PJ of Ice and Fire, they had a great score with all that hip-hop music, same musical creators as Cowboy Bebop. I don't know what you're talking about, but I love the composition of this TV show. I thought it was awesome, and he's the same composer for Game of Thrones, so I thought it was awesome. Ice and Fire, thanks for joining me. All right, anyways, I think that's it, everybody. Sorry, I think I've talked too much. My throat's getting a little bit tired. But yeah, that's it for me, everybody. Thank you so much for participating in the chat. I love talking Westworld with all you guys. But yeah, if you have any more questions, write them in the comments section of this video. I'm starting to think I might want to do one more Westworld talk. I'm just enjoying it, you know? We'll see what happens. This channel right now, I'm going to start factoring it into Game of Thrones. So we're going to make a seamless transition, if you will. So, excuse me, I need to start getting into the Game of Thrones again. I'm going to start watching the show, getting back into it. And then we can start enjoying that content. As we move out for Westworld for another like 1.5 to 2 years. So that's crazy. It's insane. So I need to try and figure out creative ways to talk about Westworld. Please let me know if you have any suggestions of what you think I should do with Westworld, what kind of videos you would want. But right now, the main focus of this channel is going to be Game of Thrones. But I'm open for suggestions. But yeah, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carbon Snail, Bian Rowe, I See Spots, Anon again, Nick T, PJ of Ice and Fire. Who else do we got here? Jen Salazar, the programmer of video games, Nancy Fontaine. Who else? Brenda Starr, and Monreal. Who else? Do we got everyone else here? Anybody want any more shout outs? Who do we got? I think that's it. But yeah, thank you guys so much. It was awesome. I had a great time chatting Westworld with you. And until next time, see you guys later.